We all face fears from time to time. Some of us face fears that are bigger than others, and some of us face fear more often than others. But it's something we all have to deal with. Hey, it's Jeff again, the other Jeff Johnson. This is Radical Impact TV, the YouTube channel of the Radical Impact Journal on Substack. I've developed a strategy that's helped me deal with some really big fears, and I want to share it with you. It won't make the fears go away, but it does make them more manageable every time. A fear I'm facing right now is a doctor's appointment tomorrow. I'm meeting with an electrophysiologist, which is really just a fancy name for a heart doctor who's also an electrician. Sort of. I've had heart issues since before I went through radiation and chemo for throat cancer back in 2018. In 2019, things got bad enough that they did a sonogram of my heart and a cardiac catheterization, a heart cath. I ended up not needing any stents, yay, but I've been on medication for irregular heartbeat ever since. And over the past several months, that medication has stopped working. Sometimes my heart will just decide to beat at 200 beats per minute, which is, to put it mildly, a bit too fast. When people ask me about it, I tell them, my heart's got a good beat and you can dance to it, but only if you can dance really fast. So I've had another round of tests, a heart monitor for a couple of weeks back in April, another sonogram last week. Right now, I'm waiting on the interpretation of those results, which makes this a good time to share how I dealt with the fear the first time around with that heart cath back in 2019. Now, here's the thing about a heart cath. It's a procedure that cardiologists perform hundreds of thousands of times a year, and almost nobody dies having a heart cath. But because, well, lawyers, the cardiologist has to tell you that you could die. You could be paralyzed, you could have a stroke, and a million other things could happen. And that gets us to the first thing we have to understand if we're going to overcome our fears. There's usually a grain of truth to our fears. If we ignore that, if we pretend it isn't real, fear will amplify that grain of truth until the worst case scenario seems like the only possible outcome. Fear wreaks havoc on idealists. It has a much harder time with realists. So the first step for me in dealing with my fear of that heart cath was admitting that yes, something bad could happen. And that's exactly where fear has a field day if we let it. Why? Because fear is a liar. Fear always tells you the worst case scenario, and it always makes that scenario seem worse than it is, more frequent than it is, more likely than it is. This has always been true for me. When I broke my back in 1989, fear told me I would never walk again. When the longest relationship of my life up to that point ended, fear told me no one would ever love me again. When I was going in for that heart cath, fear told me I was going to die and have a stroke and be paralyzed and 1,000 other things that were going to happen. Things that were statistically very unlikely. And for the record, none of them did happen. Fear has to lie to get a foothold, and then it has to feed the lie. Now, I probably shouldn't admit this, but I haven't always been the brightest bulb in the chandelier. As soon as I found out about the heart cath, I got on YouTube and watched videos of the procedure. Let's just say not pleasant. Then, because apparently I'm a glutton for punishment, I went and Googled it too. And you probably won't be surprised to hear that the thousands of videos and millions of articles about people having this procedure with zero complications are not what show up first in the search results. So here's the first thing we can do once we understand that fear is a liar. Stop feeding the fear. Fear is like a muscle. Feed it and exercise it, it grows. Starve it, it dies. I had no need to watch heart cath horror stories or read trial lawyer sales pitches about procedures gone wrong. But I chose to feed the lie, and as a result, my fear grew. Now, I can hear your argument. You weren't feeding the fear. You were just gathering information, and we need information to make good decisions. Well, yes and no. We need good information to make good decisions. Now, I did a much better job of this with my cancer diagnosis. I knew I was going online to learn about the treatment and the prognosis, so I forced myself to only look at reliable, objective, credible sources, places like MD Anderson, Memorial Sloan Kettering, Johns Hopkins, academic medical centers with real specialty clinics for the kind of cancer that I'd been diagnosed with. I should have done the same thing for the heart cath. I could have stuck to academic sources, and mostly I did, and that gave me good information to put the risk in a proper perspective. But I also read a few sensational headlines and watched a few scary thumbnails that were honestly pretty compelling. So, all that good information that a heart cath is a simple procedure that's the safest way to diagnose a heart issue and that they might even be able to fix it while they were in there was sitting right next to all that garbage that I'd also let in. I couldn't undo that. The bad input was already in the computer, but I was still the one operating the computer. So I could choose what to focus on. And that's the next key to overcoming fear. We choose what we focus on. If I'd chosen to dwell on the horror stories, they would have had to knock me out to get that needle in my arm. But a heart cath actually works better if you're awake, mildly sedated, but awake enough to give the doctor feedback on what you're feeling. So I chose to focus on the good information. I went back and reread the material about how routine a heart cath procedure really is, how beneficial it is for patients to stay awake, how often doctors use it to save lives. And you can do the same thing with whatever fear you're facing. Take yourselves back to junior high school with me for a second. Trust me, that first dance, fear was screaming at you. If you ask that person to dance and they say no, you are ruined, publicly humiliated forever, alone forever. Well, I asked her anyway. She said no. Yeah, it hurt. People laughed. That hurt me too. And it also made me mad. So I asked somebody else. She said no too. But the third girl said yes. Maybe because she wanted to dance with me. Maybe because she felt sorry for me. It doesn't really matter. She proved fear was a liar. The last girl I asked to dance is the mother of the daughter I've had with her. We've been married for more than 30 years. They both said yes. So fear is a liar. When I got my cancer diagnosis, fear thought it had another shot. It told me, you're going to die. You're going to abandon your wife. Your daughter is going to walk down the aisle without you. You are a failure. You are a walking dead man. But the truth is, treatment for the specific cancer I had advanced so far by then that the only way I actually could have died from it was if I'd refused treatment. Fear didn't give up, though. It told me the tumor at the base of my tongue, right on top of my windpipe, was going to take my voice. And the more I read from credible sources about how radiation and chemo affect the throat, the more real that possibility looked. The radiation alone could have damaged my vocal cords enough that I would have never been able to speak professionally again. Now, I've made a living with my voice for nearly 4 decades, so I don't want to lie about this. Fear got a foothold with that one. I am already physically disabled from breaking my back in 1989. I can't do manual labor. I can't even stand around long enough to be a greeter at Walmart. Writing, speaking, strategizing, making videos, that's what puts food on the table. Which brings me to the last thing we can do to overcome fear. Ask for help. I knew the biggest threat to my voice was radiation. So I asked my radiation oncologist straight up to protect it. I told him, I make a living with my voice. I'm physically disabled. My other options are limited. Is there anything you can do? He said, I think we can. I'll see what I can do. Turns out the people who worked with him called him the mad scientist because he was that devoted to getting the best outcome for every patient. He's retired now, but back then he worked insane hours trying to have every possible weapon available. The one catch, he wasn't exactly a great communicator, at least not with his patients. Honestly, I suspect that he and I had more in common than just my treatment. Autism. If you know what I mean. He delayed my treatment 3 times, and I was furious. I wanted that thing out of my body. But it turned out he was building a custom treatment plan to hit the tumor with everything it needed without touching my vocal cords. Near the end of my treatment, you could literally see the pale rectangle on my throat where he had turned the radiation machine off as it passed over my vocal cords and then turned it back on. Never let fear stop you from asking for help. Fear will tell you you're weak for asking. Maybe you are, so what? Fear will tell you people will laugh. Maybe they will, so what? The people who really matter are either going to help you when you ask, or they're going to admire you for being vulnerable enough to ask. Now, you've probably heard me call myself the unluckiest man alive. There's a real list of times I've been disfigured, crippled, and nearly killed in accidents, conditions, and events that radically altered my life. And every single time, I've gotten a little bit better at dealing with the fear that comes with it. Now, I still make mistakes. I confessed one earlier. But overcoming fear, like most good things, is a process. Like Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we do better. Right now, waiting on that electrophysiologist, the fear is up to all of its old tricks, telling me that I'll need surgery for an implanted defibrillator, telling me that I won't be able to keep working or even be able to drive my car, telling me again that I am going to die and leave my wife and my daughter to pick up the pieces. But this time, I'm actually taking my own advice. And when, not if, when you face your next fear, remember, fear is a liar. The worst case scenario almost never happens. Stop feeding the fear. You need good information, not sensational information. Choose what to focus on. Fear is a coward. Starve it. Ask for help. You do not have to face your fear alone. And you will make mistakes along the way. That's not failure. That's how we learn. It's a sign of growth.